Welcome back. Jonathan Jones, CBS NFL Insider, joins the program. I almost said Jonathan joins to talk about Myles Garrett.
Every Monday he joins.
Every Monday, as he does. Talk about Myles Garrett, the former NFL Defensive Player of the Year, the probably, in my opinion, still the best pass rusher in the NFL, the Cleveland Browns, #1 overall pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, has requested a trade from the team, the only NFL team he's played for. Do we think the Browns follow through on that request? And who could be the teams that could show interest here?
All right. Let's start with, do they follow through with it? They're not going to follow through with it right now. They are going to posture and publicly stand on, we're not trading Myles Garrett, because that is what they have been saying for the past month. Andrew Berry, the general manager, has been saying. And just because your star player created a graphic and you know, sort of like PDF'd his name and signature onto it, if you're a team that's not like, oh, well, he put out a graphic, we got to trade him now, right? So no, nothing publicly from the Browns is going to change. Free agency and the unofficial start, the legal tampering window, if you want to call it that, right? It begins on March the 10th. That's 5 weeks from now. At that point, about a week before that, we're going to know what the salary cap is for this upcoming year. We don't know it now. A lot of teams have estimates. We don't know. So I bring that up because if you're trading for Myles Garrett, you're obviously going to want to be able to, A, fit him under the salary cap this upcoming year, but you're also going to be giving him an extension because he last got one several years ago. So he's due for one when you trade for him, what you are going to have to trade for him. And so that's going to be the sweet spot, is really the beginning of March into mid-March. March 10th to 12th, that's the legal tampering window. After that, free agency, quote unquote, officially begins. That is when you would have traded Myles Garrett if you are the Cleveland Browns. Could they wait until the first night of the NFL draft? They could. I don't think that you would do that. So soft deadline, mid-March. Hard deadline, late April. So because of all of those things, understanding that, nothing is going to change publicly. Now, what is going to happen behind the scenes? Every GM who has some interest in Myles Garrett is going to call Andrew Berry, and they're going to lowball the Cleveland Browns. Hey, I'll give you this year's, first round pick. I'll give you next year's first round pick for Myles Garrett. And hopefully Andrew Berry hangs up the phone, because what it's going to cost is going to be what is essentially the equivalent of 2 first rounders and maybe then some. Right? Because you're not giving away. Mike, you called him the former NFL Defensive Player of the Year. That award's not handed out until right here in New Orleans in a couple of days. So right now, he's still the reigning NFL Defensive Player of the Year. You're not giving him away at 28 years old, right? But are you ultimately going to have to part with him? I think you probably are. And frankly, if you are the Cleveland Browns, and I'd be very interested to explore this with you guys, I actually think philosophically, fundamentally, it would be the best thing for the long-term interest of the Cleveland Browns to get 2 first-round picks for 28 going on 29-year-old Myles Garrett, not paying him, which you're going to have to pay him $35 million a year or something, and just saying, all right, we're moving on with the next chapter of Cleveland Browns football.
So if I'm Myles Garrett and you want to play hardball in Cleveland, what does that look like if you're not entertaining offers for trades? Let's just say they are really staunch in their stance here, and they're saying, you are Myles Garrett, you are the Cleveland Browns. We are not going to do that. What are Myles' options there?
I mean, then it starts to get ugly, right? Then he doesn't report for any of the voluntary stuff. Then he's not at mandatory minicamp. Let's remember, this is a guy who has made tens of millions, probably more than $100 million in career earnings. He's a part owner of an NBA team. So, like, he'll take the fines, right? He won't report to training camp.
I remember when Khalil Mack showed up week 1 of the Chicago Bears season, missed the entirety of the spring, missed the entirety of training camp. He showed up and looked like a god. And I was like, where have you been? Just in a weight room? And I would assume that could end up being the path for Myles Garrett. But if you're a fan of the team that ends up picking up Myles Garrett, I fully anticipate seeing an absolute rocket show week 1, wherever the hell he lands, because he's going to make his introduction. And if you think Myles Garrett is a scary threat right now on the Cleveland Browns, imagine him on a competitive roster. Imagine him in meaningful football games. We, as football fans, have the luxury of now potentially seeing him play on one of these winning teams, which is awesome.
I will say this about the timing, and I agree with you, JJ, on this, that it feels like if you're the Cleveland Browns, obviously your window is not right now, objectively. You were awful this year. That's why you have the number 2 overall pick. Your window isn't open for a Super Bowl. And so by the time it is, he is going to be on the downside of his career. It feels almost like when the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill, right? Yeah, they got 2 years in Miami where he was nasty. But right now, he's not the Tyreek Hill that the Chiefs traded away. And the Chiefs have a bunch of guys that they got in return who are impactful on this roster and are on rookie contracts that they needed to replenish because they were in a bad cap situation back then. So to me, it feels like a no-brainer for the Browns. Yes, you posture that you don't want to trade him, but at the end of the day, I think you got to trade him here, right?
And I agree with that, because let's just play the probabilities. Let's just play the odds, right? If you believe, and I think that Myles Garrett still has some really good years in front of him, right? No doubt at all about it. But we're talking about, if you keep him, you're going to have to pay him. And what you are banking on is that Myles Garrett is Julius Peppers. Right. That's essentially what you're saying. He is ageless. He is a first ballot Hall of Famer, and that all the body science and all the body data that we have accumulated over the years, he is going to be the exception to the rule. His body's not going to break down. We're not going to have soft tissue injuries. All of those things that happen to 99.9% of these 1% of athletes will not happen to Myles Garrett. Or you draft Abdul Carter, number 2 overall. You get 2 first-round picks. You hit reset on the Cleveland Browns franchise. You let somebody else pay him. And yeah, you're going to have to suffer through the 2025 season of watching him wreak havoc on NFL quarterbacks and everyone questioning you and whatnot. But then in 26 and 27, unless he's Julius Peppers, and he very, very well may be, but that is really the wager and the bargain you'd be making if you are the Cleveland Browns.
All right, let's move on to some coaching news.
I'm sorry. I'm just Googling Julius Peppers stats because I think someone could almost make the argument that he is Julius Peppers, and maybe even plus. I mean, Julius Peppers, one of the most legendary rushers in the game. And I'm not here to compare. I'm talking about comparing. But that speaks volumes that we're even having this debate about Myles Garrett, because he is that much better than the next guy.
The one thing I'll say, Myles Garrett, if he does and when he does retire, he'll have a future as a graphic designer, because his signature was a work of art. Did you see that thing? It looked beautiful there on the bottom of that press release. That thing was special.